So our next and last speaker says that she is a mainstream millennial. She likes bicycles. I hope it's a fixie, not just any old bicycle, but a fixie, beer, mountains, and pub trivia. Though something that sets her apart from all the other millennials is that she didn't get into baking during the pandemic. So please, everyone, welcome Mo.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Jared. I actually, I have a gravel bike, so the second best bike for a typical hipster millennial. I'm really delighted to be here. And I know that I'm the only thing keeping us from kind of socializing in happy hour, and I hope to meet a lot of y'all there. I am Maureen, but most people call me Mo, and I've been a part of Insight Lane for the past year and a half or so. And I'll be talking about recently launching a pilot program to partner with cities' Vision Zero initiatives. This talk might be a little bit more kind of policy focused than code focused, but hopefully we'll have a bit of fun with that. So I often live in cities, cyclist, like I said, but I'm also a driver, subway user, pedestrian, park lover, and much, much more. My background is in public health research. So most recently for the past 10 months or so, I've been working in COVID and kind of getting back to my roots. I've also been involved in the tech ethics and data equity groups, and I'm primarily a qualitative analysis, but I'm excited to be here because the past 10 months in particular, I've been learning R to unlock some mixed methods research opportunities, and this open source project is one of the ways that I'm hoping to use some of this newfound skill and knowledge. So Insight Lane, it's a volunteer-driven, completely open source platform that assesses and visualizes crash risk across road networks. I'll go into it a little bit more exactly how we do that, but really it was born out of the idea that we wanted to inform, benefit any residents or city governments or any other stakeholder for the purpose of improving car, bike, and pedestrian infrastructure, which is part of the reason I emphasize that I do all of those things in cities, and I suspect a lot of y'all do too. We really also support volunteer skill building. I can speak on that firsthand. Two of the main core volunteers that have been involved with the project for almost 4 years, Ben and Jenny, have really become good friends, have supported things that I'd like to do, and I've learned a lot as we've shared knowledge and contribute and built kind of community as well, which is really important during this time when we're all really mainly digital and trying to stay as safe as possible. The big goal for Insight Lane is to really provide a tool to assess crash risk. We want it to be easy. We want it to be deployable. We want it to be used. It's based on open source technology. We use OpenStreetMaps. Everything's on GitHub. We also want the tool to be able to be applied to any road network. For a couple different reasons, this is somewhat limited to cities because they're bounded. We would also like people to be able to initialize their city and add features with minimal technical overhead. So the platform is can be widely applied, but with individualized data from city, which I'll go into a little bit more. And then of course, this is kind of the policy piece or the advocacy piece, is that at the end of the day, what good is the platform if it doesn't provide kind of interpretable, actionable results, even if it's fun to build. Yeah, so this is the basic kind of process of how we do it. So any city can provide crash data. It goes through we configure it. You can add point-based features, which to any sort of crash data set. It gets processed, then we model it. We create kind of individualized segments that are consisted of different OpenStreetMap segments. We create a model which generates a set of risk scores for each road segment. And then we also have a visualization that I'll show you in the end. This is kind of a repeat of that, but some of the kind of cool things that I like about it is that each segment is basically analyzable, and you can add features to each one of those. So that makes it a little bit different than some of the other Vision Zero kind of analyses that often look at density rather than kind of segment-based analysis. We also split it into bike, pedestrian, and vehicle. So you can see risk for each one of those kind of transportation modes along a road network. We predict a model-based risk score across all the segments that goes from 0 to 1 and is city-based. So a 0.5 in Boston would not be the same as a 0.5 in Philadelphia. Rather, you could look at it within city. So it's really, really individualized. We also can make different recommendations. Let's say that you want to get to you want to see like basically 2 different routes getting to City Hall, which one is a higher risk route. And that might tell you some things about like the accessibility of that neighborhood to a particular point on a map. And then we also visualize it and have an interactive map, which I would encourage y'all to check out on our website, which I'll share at the end. Here's an example of kind of the route level risk scores. So this is in Boston. And we basically looked at 2 points arriving at City Hall. And the blue zone is the lowest risk for a particular 1 mile or 2 mile segment leading to City Hall, and the red is the highest risk score. Just note that because it is a risk score, this doesn't mean like that it doesn't correlate one-on-one with crashes, rather it's predictive risk score. We are in multiple cities. One of our first volunteers was from Boston, which is why we started there, but then we had several volunteers come in from Australia and have a couple cities in Australia too. This is an example of what you can see on our website where we generate, help basically say what are the highest risk segments in a particular city, and also generate risk scores. In this case, I screenshot a map from the bicycle risk segments in Brisbane, Australia. So what led us to launching a pilot initiative to partner with cities? You know, at the beginning, this would have been back in 2016, a bunch of us were part of kind of an open source group called Data for Democracy, and people were very excited about using data to support different policy initiatives or even just to kind of geek out about it. One of the volunteers was the chief data officer of Boston, and kind of brought the idea that there's traffic crashes are increasing, Vision Zero initiatives are gaining popularity. When Boston took on a Vision Zero initiative, they sought help from its community in order to accomplish some of its goals. So the team got together 2016, really focused on Boston initially, and that really still is where most of our data analysis is. It was initially called Crash Model Project, which we expanded to Insight Lane. In 2018, we expanded to many other cities, about 10, which I'll show in a minute. And then in 2019, it was a little bit of a pause for us. It was about maintaining the pipeline and kind of reflecting on what this would actually do. I joined sometime in 2019 when I was trying to find an additional project to really sink my teeth into, and we kind of came up together that like one of the things we could do to revitalize and relaunch the project was to actually kind of show cities how we could potentially help them. And I'll go a little bit through the process on how we had to think about doing that, because I think there are always some really interesting like communication goals when you're communicating with maybe a government or a stakeholder who may or may not have the same kind of coding background and with a coding project. So one of the things, this may seem really basic, but I think it's also important. We were initially part of kind of like a consortium of different open source projects. We decided that if we were going to be reaching out to city, we needed to do some communication and branding work. So we made a logo, we got our own Twitter account, and we have a website. And we just felt that that would be kind of along the communication like expectations of being able to reach out to cities that might be looking for some sort of data-driven analysis to support their policy work. Again, started in Boston. The platform is built to be used in any city. I listed some of them here. Most recently, as part of the new initiative, we've reached out to Charlottesville, Virginia, and Austin, Texas. I'm actually from Texas, but north of Boston, so that's been really fun. So I'm going to try an interactive experiment, and this is part of kind of maybe the meta that every city is a little bit different. So I am going to tweet real quick what I wrote here. And I would love if you can either share what city you're in, either in the chat or on Twitter, where I just tweeted, or something that you love about transport, or a particular memory you have, or maybe if you think your city might be interested in having the crash modeling platform that we've built be used. I'll go into some of the options for cities in a couple of slides. And maybe if people, let me make sure, press that, yeah. If people are actually respond, then I'll try to read some out loud at the end. So a couple of things that values that drive the partnership to think about, like while we're thinking about like the different cities that we have chosen, is that cities have multiple stakeholders. You're a stakeholder in the city where you live. You might be part of a advocacy organization. You probably voted or participated somehow in the election that happened a month ago. And I think it's interesting to always think like what questions might you have about your neighborhood or your city? What might you change or create? We really want to support participatory collaborative democracy because we have a platform that can be broadly used, each city, but at the same time, each city has its own data, constituents and concerns. Most of us live in either Boston and I live in Texas. So we don't know what's going on in New Orleans, for instance, and would really want to support the kind of local volunteerism and participatory action there. And then also like really emphasizing that volunteers and stakeholders are welcome to co-create and build on what we do. So we have had people come in, initialize their city with the crash data and do a few things, but then we never see them again. But as long as it's getting used, we're really happy. So as we've started to do this outreach, really in the past 3 or so months, we've kind of noticed 2 different scenarios that seem to be popping up, both in our previous work that we've done with Boston and other cities, and then also with what we're doing now. So some city governments already have done crash analysis and really have a digital platform similar to ours. That was the case with Boston, but they look at crash density while we look more at road features. So we think that's an opportunity to offer a different perspective. We can also potentially add an additional feature that they might be looking at because of the way that we do the analysis, where every feature is kind of snapped to a road segment and isn't as density dependent. It's also really fun. When we reached out to Austin, we were able to compare notes and share and learn, and might even be applying for some type of grant together. And the other thing too is whenever a city already has a digital platform that's similar, that's in line with kind of a Vision Zero policy goals, their crash data is usually open and available. Some of the cities haven't had the resources or in-house tech expertise to create this type of platform. We view this as another opportunity, and that's actually where we're focusing a lot of our outreach. I think one thing to emphasize is that a city government partner does not have to be the government, and multiple stakeholders may add value to contextualizing the model output. So if you're part of a bicycle coalition, if you're part of like kind of a moms and fathers group, one thing that we have run into is that the crash data may not be as easily available. We've created a form that people can fill out on our website that I'll also link in some of my tweets and put in the chat later, that people can fill out to see if we can try to help them. One kind of funny story with that is that somebody, I think they were in Florida, was very interested, but all the crash data was on floppy disk. So they were not as accessible. So I think this is where we like also really support value-wise this idea of like open data, and also this idea of local sustainability. So when a local group also like kind of partners and joins our Slack channel and is really involved in their particular city, we think that that's really exciting. So this is kind of the meta part, but if we think about what a city is, we're the city, right? So it's not just a city government. I had a little bit of fun looking up the origin of the word city in Latin, and then also because it means citizen, we also really support residents of cities, acknowledging that not everybody has had the privilege of citizenship in the US and other countries. And I really loved that in Greece, they really, in ancient Greece, which is also kind of the seat of where like at least we perceive democracy to come from, then the citizen was also like the most basic unit of the city. And on that note, especially because we grew out of a group called Data for Democracy and really still support some of the values of democratic participation, is that we want to support the local participation and hope that the expertise of the public and civic participation and democracy as practice and open source and open data projects are really part of that. We hope that this provides kind of an open, transparent way to link data and data analysis to advocacy and policy. That being said, this is a little bit of a kind of interpretation. It also means that when we seek a government partner, then one of the things that is part of that partnership is that there has to be trust in the expertise of the public, support for civic participation, and understanding that democracy can be an innovative practice, which often includes like ceding some of the power of having access to data or even access to analysis of policy. So that accessibility is really, really key. If your data is on floppy disk, it's harder to get access to. I really want to emphasize too, I admire a lot Taiwan as a leader in digital and collaborative democracy, particularly with COVID. They've really opened kind of their technology doors and let citizens really directly hack into many different types of support systems. I'm going to just list the menu of options for city partners. One thing that we found when we were reaching out to cities is that it was also helpful for us to say like exactly what we could offer instead of having kind of an open conversation and not assuming that a city could like immediately look at like our GitHub or our website and know what we could potentially provide. So one is that cities sometimes we have this forum where they can let us know they're interested. If they already have crash data, one of the options we say is we can actually load it, initialize it, run it through our platform and generate the data viz and the risk scores, which is one of our outputs. If there's a particular policy question, we really love it if they ask the question and we see if our data can actually support answering that and kind of thinking through that. And then the other thing, specifically this picture here is in Austin, and we were having a little bit of fun reaching out to Austin. The information, like the gray like node, is a voting booth. So this is around the time of the election, and we were curious what the like higher risk routes to get to the voting booth or not were. And we were thinking about this in kind of terms of like accessibility. So like if a polling location is not accessible to some neighborhoods because, or it's more dangerous to get there, this might tell us some of the ways that like things can be, resources can be distributed throughout the city. The other thing too that I think is really cool, the output is basically a segment and a risk score and lat long. We can combine that particular segment and risk scores with other data. So we've begun to look at census data and understand equity concerns. And those are some of the mini projects that I'm getting to experiment a little bit as I grow my coding knowledge in R as well. Again, we are a volunteer-run organization, so I told my team that we also would share that we're actively seeking volunteers. One thing that I think has made this project so sustainable for such a long time, I mean, it's really been 3 or 4 years of people having near weekly meetings, is that we try to create a really sustainable practice. So it's less based on hackathons and more based on kind of the slow paced work of getting a little bit of done every week. Also, I will say the documentation, and this is not on me, this is really, I have to thank Jenny, our data engineer, is excellent. And I think one thing with the pace matching with partners is that compared to maybe startups, it may appear that governments move more slowly, but a lot of this has to do with just like kind of the structure with which it's set up, and we really are happy to like support and match that type of consideration and cycle. And let me check time, I'm okay. And so this is to get in touch. The best way to communicate with us is really our Slack channel, which you can find on our website at the bottom. You can also write us or fill out a Google form to try to onboard your city, and we'll get out to you. Twitter, which we set up in order to pilot this launch with cities, is a great way too. I manage the Twitter account, and then our email will get forwarded to all of us. So I do appreciate that. All right. I don't think I can see the chat as a speaker, but hopefully people wrote some stuff in there and kind of shared their city. Like full disclosure, if you shared a city, I might be reaching out to you to see if you would want to onboard it or work on the project in any particular way, because I think that's can be really exciting and give a lot of insight into basically future analysis, and then also different policies or supporting kind of the Vision Zero initiative that your city may or may not have adopted. Yeah, so that's about it. Let me look on Twitter. And I was given a recommendation to talk to the PedNet Coalition, so thank you, Stas. Appreciate that. Okay, that's it. So thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. I imagine a lot of people here are city dwellers and make good use of alternate modes of transportation, they'll call it, whether it's subway, bus, or bicycle. And why that's called alternate, I don't really know. Why cars get priority. I get around primarily by foot, bicycle, and subway. So that was great for me. And we have come